Hello, everyone. This is Patrick from ApplyChat Healthcare. Welcome to our latest ApplyChat Healthcare podcast as part of our regular webinar series on nurse and healthcare recruitment topics and healthcare human resource matters generally. To watch our webinar videos and view the presentation notes, you can find the link to our YouTube page in the podcast notes. You can also find all of our free resources and learn how ApplyChat Healthcare finds more qualified nurse applicants for our healthcare clients by visiting us at applychathealthcare.com.
Hello, everyone. So thanks to everyone who's connecting for today's session. We're here for our latest ApplyChat Healthcare webinar. This one's on maintaining quality in healthcare recruitment. So my name's Eleanor Blair, and I'm a sourcing executive with ApplyChat Healthcare. ApplyChat works with healthcare organizations in the USA and Canada to help them find and hire more nurses. We specialize in sourcing passive nurse candidates from outside of job boards. In fact, we can reach up to 70% of all nurses in any market. So we're able to bring an entirely new audience of nurses to our clients' vacancies. We also screen and engage with every applicant to make sure they're a good fit for our healthcare clients. To find out more about ApplyChat and to access our free nurse recruitment resources, please check out Patrick's online business card. The link is on the screen and we'll put it in the chat as well. At that link, you'll be able to view all of our past webinars on nurse recruitment and sign up for our future online events. You can also join our Nurse Recruitment Secrets on Facebook group and as well our Healthcare Recruitment Leaders Exchange. You can subscribe to our monthly Nurse Recruitment Secrets newsletter, and you can also connect with Patrick to learn more about ApplyChat Healthcare's nurse sourcing services. So yeah, feel free to contact him or message us in the chat here if you're interested as well. Now, for today's webinar, we're going to explore effective strategies to enhance and maintain the quality of hire in healthcare recruitment. So now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. So first up, we've got Patrick Thiele. He's the Chief Operating Officer of ApplyChat Healthcare. He's been with us for 3 years, and he previously worked as a senior manager in the Canadian criminal justice system for over 25 years. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Eleanor. Thank you.
And our special guest today is Donna Horowitz. So Donna has a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology from DePaul University. And she's recently moved into the role of managing director at Poel Consulting. And she previously served nearly 5 years with Personify as the head of research and development and quality. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
So yeah, feel free to reach out to Donna with questions and for advice. We're sharing her LinkedIn profile and email address on the slide. So yeah, thanks again to Donna for joining us today. And now I'll turn over to Patrick to start the discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Eleanor, for the introduction. And hi to Donna. Welcome. And thanks so much for your interest in doing the webinar with us. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. We had some great chats preparing for this. I'm looking forward to the expertise you're going to bring. So I would love to just start by asking you to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us about Poel Consulting and your background.
Okay. As Eleanor mentioned, and thank you, Patrick. It's nice to be here. But as Eleanor mentioned, I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and I spent the first 10 years of my career in assessment and selection. How do you select the best candidates for a role, or how do you develop people to be qualified for a role, and then as well as organization development and organization effectiveness. And from there, I moved into all the different parts of HR. So talent acquisition, compensation, benefits, employee relations, and eventually worked my way up to become head of HR and eventually CHRO. And then in several different companies across different industries, both publicly held and privately held. And then I was ready for something a little different. And I had run across Personify because I used them, starting in one company and then in 2 more to help with recruiting, and saw significant improvements in what we were doing, both costs and time to fill and quality of hire. Mm-hmm. And so I went to work for Personify, and got to know recruiting there. And as she mentioned, I was there 4.5 years. And in addition to the quality, I particularly focused in on the healthcare recruiting because of the challenges faced, especially recruiting nurses. And that's how I got to know Applichat too.
Yeah, we worked with you when you were at Personify and with providing some services for you in your healthcare recruitment. So that's great. Nice to be getting to know you in a new context now as well. So you touched on a lot of things there. You bring a lot of expertise from your background, from HR generally and the healthcare recruiting. And interesting, you talk about the time to hire and the quality of hire. Of course, such interesting and important conversations to our audience who tunes in to watch these webinars. And of course, quality of hire is challenging in any industry, but in healthcare, we seem to have sometimes less luxury of being selective, right? Because there's such a demand and so few applicants out there for the roles. But quality is still important. We have to keep our eye on it, and I know that's what you wanted to talk about today. So let's jump right in. I'm going to bring up our agenda. So today, you and I prepared to talk about identifying the root causes of quality issues in recruitment, identifying the job duties and requirements, assessing candidates, and some thoughts you have about the use of technology in recruitment, and then also some thoughts about best practices for retention. So lots to talk about there, and I know you have lots of things in mind to share about that. And I also want to add to the people who are watching live today, please put any comments, questions in the comment section on the chat, and we will try and keep our eye on those and get to those if you do have comments and questions. So we'll love to hear your thoughts about that. So I am going to really turn it over to Donna, but we'll start with this question for the group. And Donna, you were interested in hearing from the group if anyone wants to share what is the biggest challenge you're facing regarding quality of hire. So please, just in the comments again on the chat, please put your response, your thoughts about the biggest challenge you're facing regarding quality of hire, and we'll keep our eye on that and touch on that as necessary as well. Donna, any thoughts about that, or anything else you want to say as introduction?
No. I'm interested in hearing in getting answers to this question today and hearing why people joined, what they wanted to get out of the call today, because that'll help me direct my comments. So
great. All right. Perfect. Good. Well, we'll watch for those comments in the chat. But let's get started. So, Donna, one of the first things that you talked about when we were preparing for this call was that there's a need in every situation to identify both the root causes of any quality of hire issues and the job duties and requirements. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you chat about that, why that's important. And then you had shared a couple of tools that you really like to use.
Right. Okay, so let's first talk about the root causes of quality of hire issues and how to look at that. So I like to use problem-solving tools for identifying root causes. And the key to using a problem-solving tool is to identify what gap you have, the gap that you're going to problem solve for. And a gap is measurable, and it states what's the desired state and what's the current state. So then you have your gap identified, and that's where you do your problem solving to understand the root cause so that you can get to your desired state. I've done root cause analysis of quality of hires at least 3 companies, I think 4. And I've done it 2 different ways. One is to look at how long did it take to fill, time to fill, because that was the biggest issue in one company. And the second way was to look at how long did we retain people once they were hired. Our goal was at least 1 year, preferably 2. So anybody who left within a year, we looked at what happened. And interestingly enough, across all 3 and maybe 4 companies, we found the same thing, which was it was in not properly defining upfront what was required for success in the job and what we were looking for. So in terms of time to fill, that means you spend time bringing in and interviewing and looking at people who aren't the right fit. And then once you get them hired, a lot of times the reason people didn't know it was the right fit, if it was the right fit or not, there were several people involved in the process. And once the candidate started, became an employee, the expectations were different from the different stakeholders, and so they couldn't succeed. And so they either left or they were let go. And that was the case in 60 to 80% of the cases that we looked at.
60 to 80%. So not understanding or communicating the requirements of the job and
Or agreeing.
and the duty, or okay, yeah, good point, or agreeing on it, right? And then, as you said, it would attract the wrong audience, and it would set up managers to select the wrong people.
Right. And so anyway, the problem solving tool that we use for that is called A3 problem solving. Some of you may have heard of it. It comes from Toyota's lean management.
Right.
And we do have a link for you guys.
So, and if people do want the links, Donna has a number of samples or links and different options that we can share when she talks through the presentation. Let us know either in the chat. You'll need to give us your full name so we can find you on LinkedIn, or send us an email or a LinkedIn message, and we'll get it to you that way as well. Okay,
yeah,
so,
and I do want to make a comment about nurses in particular. That's one Patrick and I talked about this in preparation for this meeting. That's one analysis I've never done. I'd love to do one because I do think it's probably a little bit different than what I've seen in other industries because of the talent shortage and the opportunities available to them. And so it's quite a challenge for retention of nurses.
Sure. And let me just share on the screen a comment from Monica. She says, retaining nurses is an issue for us as well. We aren't sure if they're just getting better offers, but we've seen an issue with keeping nurses long-term. I work with a pediatric home health company. So that's really interesting. Common challenge, and but well said. And maybe Donna, you can touch on that if you have anything specific you wanted to mention as you go through the problem solving.
Yeah. And one thing I have seen in general in some of the healthcare systems that Personify worked with and I was involved with, we did have better retention of nurses in home healthcare than in hospital settings. So that should give you a leg up, I would think, being home healthcare. But it's a good question. And it could be, so some of these issues may apply that we'll talk about for selection, but it could be other things that are beyond the selection process that could be getting in the way.
Right. Okay. Anything else you wanted to share about the problem solving process and working through that? And I think, and you mentioned that's really interesting that in 60 to 80% of the time, the problem was about the wrong job requirements or incomplete job requirements.
Yep.
Okay, great. Right. So problem solving, and then another favorite of yours that you mentioned is the job analysis process. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously a good way to make sure that you understand the requirements for what you're hiring is a good job analysis. Now, job descriptions help and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to talk particularly about one technique that is used a lot in IO psychology, but not outside of it. And I have found it very useful as an HR professional throughout my career. And that's called critical incidents. There's a very formal way to conduct critical incidents. I do a more informal way as part of an intake call. But basically, a critical incident is an incident that happened in the workplace that showed that somebody was a really good performer or a really poor performer. So in healthcare, it might be giving the wrong meds would be a critical incident. That would be a negative example. A positive example would be incredible feedback from a family after dealing with a nurse. And so the important piece of that is, the nice part about critical incidents is it gives you insight not only into the skills needed, which you can usually get just from interviewing the stakeholders involved, but also into the culture and what it takes to succeed. Because some of the things that you'll find out in critical incidents is how they deal with their management, how they deal with their peers. That'll all come out in critical incidents, and it may help you understand some very subtle things that it takes to succeed. So for Monica, for example, the critical incidents may, when somebody leaves, what caused them to leave? What was that straw that broke the camel's back? You may find that there's some pattern of behavior going on with somebody in the organization that's causing these folks to leave. Right. As an example, I didn't making that up, but that's an example. So the way you do critical incidents is basically you just ask for the critical incident, then what led to the situation, what happened, and then what was the outcome of that situation. And you ask it a few times, and you'll start getting a picture of different patterns of things that keep repeating themselves in terms of what's going on in the organization.
Okay, great. And you said you've used this multiple times. You haven't used it specifically again with nursing, but you're interested in doing that.
Right. And right. I do have some. Again, I have some links that you could use. Right. There is an academic paper which tells you the full blown how do you do a formal critical incident, how you do that formally, and then there's some simpler ones, one that's written and one that's a video. So.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, people can let us know if they want those links. You had an example. Did you have an example you wanted to share for using job analysis?
Yeah. This one, again, it's not healthcare related. And this was early on in my career. But I was asked to go to do on a campus interviewing for an R&D engineering group. And so I went to the department and I did a critical incident thing, and I asked them about that and got a bunch of information. And what was nice was two things. First of all, it helped me because the people I was talking to were working on PhDs and stuff. They were pretty well qualified in terms of skill and ability. And it was the more subtle social things and soft skill things that really made the difference between who was likely to succeed and who wasn't. So it helped me to identify them. And then the thing that I didn't realize it would do was it gave HR a lot of credibility because they saw HR come in and ask them about, well, what does it take to succeed around here, and apply it with the candidates. And just, it was amazing how it improved our credibility. So.
Oh, that's great. So lots of side benefits as well as beyond your main goal. That's really interesting too. Yeah. So I'm wondering about, and most of our audience or much of our audience are in talent acquisition, HR, healthcare management. And when they're looking at, I'm thinking about you use the example of critical incidents. If we have a critical incident, even in our internal processes, our recruitment processes, whether it's something great that happened, we had a really successful run of hires and it went really smoothly and quickly, and we got a lot of hires done, or the opposite where we're having a lot of problems. Could you use one of these analyses, especially the critical incident analysis, with those kind of processes as well?
I would say that would be more of a problem-solving process where that analysis would work better. The critical incident is really about understanding what's required to succeed in the job.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Well, people can consider that as well. And again, we can share those links to the templates and the tools for those who are interested. That's great. Okay. So once you have a good understanding of any problems that have been in the past, and you've also have a good understanding of the requirements for the job and the kind of people you were looking for, obviously it's going to be really critical to do a proper assessment of your candidates and make sure you have the right people coming into that job. So let's talk about that. What are some ways and some elements you like to keep in mind for getting the right people through that process?
Okay. So there's several ways to assess candidates. Mostly everybody uses resumes for professional jobs. With nursing, I know, at least in the experience that I had with it, that wasn't as helpful. The people who had resumes were generally people who were looking for a job, and most of the time we were going after passive candidates because there weren't
Right.
enough active candidates, and they didn't have resumes prepared, and we didn't want to hold back the opportunity to interview them just because they didn't have resumes. So, but where you have them, resumes can be a way to assess people. Interviews, reference checks, job samples, and assessments. So those are 5 different ways that you can assess people. And there's all kinds of tools out there for doing that. I highly recommend the book Top Grading by Brad Smart.
Okay.
And I was horrified when I read the book because I felt like my PhD was summarized in this one book and it was unfair. But he does a great job. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time on interviewing because that is done pretty regularly and the types of interviews you can use. And there's a link that I have available on the types of interviews by Morgan McKinley. But 3 types that are the most common are behavioral, situational, and chronological. Behavioral interviewing is the kind of thing where you say, tell me about a time where, whatever it is, and then you listen to the answer and assess whether they are displaying certain traits. Situational is where you say, here's the situation, what would you do? And the advantage of a situational interview is with a behavioral interviewing, especially because it is so common, people prepare and they have it down. They know what their points are. They may even have tweaked what actually happened to give the best side of it, that kind of thing. It may be what they hoped to happen, wished would have happened, whatever. When you give them a situation and ask them how would they respond, you get a good feeling for could they really handle that situation. And then there's chronological interviewing. And that is a really good one. That's where you go through their resume and you ask about basically what motivated them to leave each position they were in and what motivated them to take the next position. And those are 2 separate questions. Most people see that as one and the same. They're not. And you begin to see motivations. So an example there was one time I was interviewing a finance person in a company where there's a lot of pressure put on finance people to get everything exactly right. And I noticed that she had a pattern of leaving when things got tough. And it was clear to me that she wasn't going to be able to succeed in the culture that we had in our company. So things like that come out in a chronological interview that's hard to see any other way.
So do you use a combination of the 3 in most of the interviews you conduct?
Yes, I do. I try to use all 3.
And do you have a weight on one or the other, one of the 3?
No, it depends. I might have weights on certain, like I'm looking for this kind of trait, and depending on how I get at it, whether I get at it from the chronological or the situational or the behavioral, but not the specific type of interview. It's just those types of interviews are good for getting different types of information.
Okay, great. And you mentioned Morgan McKinley's book, Types of Job Interviews. And then I also shared a link to Top Grading, the book by, I forget his name.
Brad Smart.
There it is, Brad Smart. Thank you. I shared that link in the chat as well. Great. Okay, great. All right, resumes, interviews. Oh, I just wanted to touch on resumes. It was interesting that you talk about resumes and nursing, and because passive candidates is the business we're in at AppliChat, and we know that if we are able to find a nurse applicant or any healthcare personnel, they're not actively looking for a job, then they probably don't have a resume ready or maybe not up to date. And we don't want to lose them by saying you need to build a resume. We want to get them in the conversation. And we have clients who are very successful with those applicants because they tell us, just bring them in the door. We'll talk to them. If we need a resume, we'll get it later. So through our screening, we try and get most of the background that you would find in a resume, and then it can be built into a resume process later. And that's been successful for our clients as well. So interesting that you say that. Resume is just one way of getting the background, but it's a process most people are really used to in our systems, but it's helpful to be creative.
Yeah.
Okay, resume, interview, and then reference checks you mentioned. Let's talk about reference checks. Another challenging area. Yeah,
it's very challenging. And Brad Smart has a whole appendix dedicated to reference checking and how to do it. And I have found that he's correct. What works best, if it can happen, which it often can't, is for a manager to talk to a manager and say, I'm looking at hiring this person, help me to know how to manage them. What are they good at? Where can I help them? And then it's less threatening to bring up areas of development for somebody when you do it that way.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. And I know often people say, well, the challenge is, I mean, if they send us a reference, first of all, do we really understand who they are? So that's one challenge, but also you're going to get references that are people that are going to say something good about you typically. But you make a good point. If you can get manager to manager and then have a more honest conversation. The other thing I know I'll let you go ahead.
I left something out. It's not just manager to manager. It's manager to whoever. So, I'm going to be the one managing them. So it could be a customer, could be a peer, could be a manager. But I'm going to be the one managing them, help me make them successful.
Okay.
So it's for the good.
Great. Okay. And do you ever use, or have you often used global reference checks? So in an government organization I worked with, it was a standard practice where we would tell the applicant, thanks for the references, but just so you know, we require access to global references. Do you consent to us contacting whoever we want? And if they didn't, well, then that kind of raised a flag in itself. But then once we had that consent, we could reach out to anyone where we saw they'd worked in the past and explore and try and get into their background. Is that something you've done before or would recommend?
I had not heard of that.
So that's
in different countries. Yeah, I've worked across different countries. So different countries have different laws about it, and that affects. But so I'm talking U.S. and Canada right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because it could be different other places.
Sure. And I think as long as you have the consent, then at the interview stage, then that's something that can really help. Okay, great. So resume interview, reference checks. Now you wanted to talk about job samples.
Job samples are exactly that. You take a piece of the job and you have them perform it. So for a marketing position, you might ask somebody to do a presentation about how they marketed something or how they would market something. That's that situational behavioral. Or, if the nurse, you wanted them to show that they have a skill to do something, you could have them do that. But I've had for executive assistants and stuff like that, I have created some Excel spreadsheet stuff for them to do just to show us see what their Excel skills actually are versus what they tell us on paper. And it's usually pretty different. You can also assess accuracy that way. Even they'll always tell you they're accurate, but this way you can actually take a look at how accurate they are, that kind of stuff.
Right. And I know in nursing, talking to pediatric home care companies, when the nurse is going to be going out into the home, they're not going to have ongoing supervision. It's really critical to know what their skills are. And often those companies will have an assessment in the office and where they're watching them perform a skill and making sure they have that skill and can perform that on their own. Okay, great. Anything else about that? Or did you want to move into assessments?
Nope, nothing else about that. And then assessments are, the kind of assessments that psychologists come up with. I once made an assessment for salespeople, and it was used. It could be used for sales reps and sales leadership. So, it gets at the underlying skills and traits needed to succeed in those jobs.
Okay, great. So the 5 ways that you use to assess candidates. That's great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that we talked about technology and recruitment, and technology's changed a lot, of course, over the years. We've seen that change a lot. And you pointed out to me that this is not an area of expertise for you, but you did have some thoughts about the use of technology in recruitment. Would you like to share about that?
Yeah, I think, the main things to consider are your hiring volume and your budget, and then finding that right balance between that. It helps to get a complete analysis of the needs and the potential solutions. I think it's usually helpful as a HR person. I found it helpful to bring in people from the outside because usually none of us knew. You want somebody who's keeping up with what's out there. And if you're not keeping up with it, even on every 6 months, you could end up not knowing what's out there and what you should be doing. So a good analysis would look at your processes, what's automated, what could be automated, and then, again, a cost versus a volume kind of trade-off. And then in recruiting, there are 2 pieces really to technology. One is the automation of the process itself, and the second is recruitment marketing. and all the online methods of getting the word out there and using them properly.
Right.
So once you've done that analysis, now you can prioritize based on your needs and your budget what you're going to do. Some examples would be optimizing your existing ATS and using all the relevant functions to streamline the process, that kind of stuff.
So often I've heard people say, we've had the ATS for years. We were looking at maybe getting a new one or changing something. And then suddenly they figured out that it had other functions that they were not using, were not aware of. And that's often the case. There's often functionalities within what you already have. So that's a good level of first assessment when you're talking about technology.
Yep. And some of them will cost more to add the,
right.
I can't think of the term. But anyway, that's a good place to start. And then recruitment marketing has, automations and all the sources you can use. Personify, we had a recruitment marketing department that did nothing but, and when it comes to insourcing and outsource, there's always a decision with a lot of this stuff about insourcing and outsourcing. Do you try to do it yourself, or do you outsource?
Right.
And even though we had a whole department devoted to recruitment marketing, AppleChat had expertise that we did not have in terms of being able to get word out on social media and hit the correct population, the nurses, that we weren't able to achieve. And so they were able to do stuff for us that we couldn't do, and it was worth our while to outsource to AppleChat to get that done.
Yeah, that was a great partnership, but it's a really good example. Even though you had a large organization with a specific department that focused on this, there's so many pieces of expertise, right? And it sometimes doesn't make sense to try and develop that expertise in-house if there's someone else out there that can do it in a more cost-effective manner. So yeah, that's great. Thanks for raising that. Great partnership with Personify.
Yeah. So, and then sometimes they can just do it less expensive. Outsourcing it means doing it less expensively. So, or less hassle. So a lot of times the onboarding processes, that takes a lot of follow-up. There has to be somebody really devoted to staying on top of candidates to make sure they do all the things they need to do.
Right.
From the time, I'm talking about, when I say onboarding in this context, I'm talking about from offer to the day they start. Right. I'm not talking about the next period of time from when they start till they're fully onboarded, but just the onboarding before they start. There's a lot of paperwork and confusing stuff for applicants because they don't do it every day. And plus just staying in touch with them and keeping them feeling connected to your company before they start so that you can be sure they'll show up, or at least as sure as you can be.
Yep.
So that can, a lot of times I see that ends up being worthwhile to outsource because it can be done more cheaply using an outside company than trying to reserve capacity within the HR team to do it.
Okay. That's interesting. So that's an interesting assessment for not just technology, but all sorts of services. But technology being one, as you say, even if you're not an expert, find the right people to first do that assessment, and then perhaps see if you need to bring in the right people to provide that service. Okay. Interesting. So you mentioned onboarding, and that's an important piece of the retention process that you wanted to talk about. And these are the points that you wanted to talk about regarding retention and best practices. So candidate experience, onboarding, workplace culture, and professional development and growth. So I'll let you roll into that from what you were just saying about onboarding and the candidate experience.
Yeah. So the candidate experience, I'm sure most of you know how important that is. And it can be both for the people you hire and even for the people who end up not getting hired for one reason or another. We called them silver medalists at Personify. The people who either turn you down because the timing's not right, or for some other reason, or the people who you pass this time, but maybe for a future job, they will be the right fit.
Right.
And so that it starts with the application process. That has to be as simple as possible, especially with nurses. We know that you lose a lot of them if your application process is too in depth. And And then regular contact and timely feedback. When one of the reasons I went to work for Personify was because when I was a customer of theirs, I had, for one of the companies that I worked with when I was using Personify, I used to take the new hires out for dinner the first night of their orientation. And I would go around the table and ask everybody, what made you decide to accept the offer from us? And I was amazed at how often they told me it was because of how Personify treated me during the process.
Candidate experience. Yeah.
That candidate experience is so critical. The regular contact, the timely feedback, the, responding when they ask a question in a timely manner. It's just really important.
Absolutely.
Another thing that is very important, and this is especially for nurses, we had a lot of success helping our clients with this, what we called the game day experience. So Personify was founded by a bunch of football players. So that's where the game day experience comes in. And that would be, and this didn't apply during COVID when people weren't coming on site to interview. But now that things are starting to go back to in person, that game day experience of coming on site, what is their experience? And we would get our clients to really think through from the candidate's point of view, every minute of their interaction. So parking, that can be incredibly confusing. Sometimes you have to pay for parking at some healthcare systems. So just making sure that they know where to park, it's going to be easy for them. They don't have to pay for it.
Right.
When they come in the building, giving them a bottle of water to have for the day. And then making sure they get a really nice tour that shows what's good about that location, if that's where they're going to be working, if it's not home health care. We also, one client that we worked with was a very big rural healthcare system that there weren't enough nurses locally. So they were always looking to relocate nurses. So we created a survey for those nurses when they would come, and we would create a whole experience for them around the interview and the on-site visit that looked at, we would ask them, do you want to see housing? Do you want to see schools? Do you want to talk to parents? Do you want to, you have to be careful how you ask these questions, as you can't, we're not looking for information. And I think it helped that the third party recruiter asked, not the employer, not the potential employer, but we would ask these questions so that we could set up a day or two, whatever made sense, that they'd experience the town, they'd experience the healthcare system, and just feel good about and know how much we wanted them to come.
Right. That's great. And it sounds like, some of what you're describing is common sense. So it seems really maybe simple, but I think what's key is to have a plan, right? And to be really consistent. And if one person is doing it and they're great at it, and then they're off that day or on holidays, that people need to know what the plan is and do it consistently. And so that pieces don't get missed with that game day presentation and experience. That's useful. Yeah. It's great that again, coming back to the candidate experience, that's so interesting, your example of what you learned anecdotally. And you've mentioned that with nursing, it's hard to be selective with nurses, but and there's not always a silver medalist because you've got so many vacancies, but that can apply when it's a promotion, right? Or an internal growth or a change for a more select position. They may not be ready today, or they may not be the top candidate today, but what else can we do with them? And you're going to talk about professional development, being able to give people a roadmap to see where they can go in the future is going to be, it's a much better way to keep people in the organization. Otherwise, they're going to look elsewhere to find that roadmap. That's right. So that all ties together. Okay, thank you. Anything else you wanted to say about game day or the candidate experience?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, and I think you made a very good point about the consistency. That's the problem. Sometimes I think that recruiters have the same reputation as lawyers. People hate dealing with HR recruiters because they feel like it doesn't do anything for them. Right.
You mentioned about onboarding. It's useful to do. It may be useful to have someone from outside to outsource that to help with the onboarding. Yeah. you had some thoughts specifically around background screening, drug testing, and those pieces. Can you talk any more about that and about when you would do those pieces in the onboarding process?
Yeah, I think I kind of covered it before. I forgot that we had it here in this part of the conversation. But the key there is follow up, and having that, making so that they start on time.
Got it. Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces here, and obviously a factor at times is how to get the pieces done without delaying the process, right? And talking to some employers, I know that they'll do some of these pieces, like reference checks, for example. They'll conduct those during the onboarding process, and before they start in the job, they're going to complete their reference check, but we're not going to delay other pieces to get some of these specific check marks checked off. Okay, great. So you also want to talk about the importance of positive work culture and about the development opportunities. And those are huge areas, of course. And it's not up to one person to make decisions and change those, but we all have an influence on them. We all play a role. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot. I mean, those could be their own webinars,
right?
Each one of them. So that's why, in terms of quality, what I thought I'd address here is just how to measure them and how are we doing with them. I guess what I would start with is surveys. It's one good way to know, do we have a good, is the culture what we want it to be, is employee surveys on a regular basis so that you can keep track of the pulse. I've used this is technology. It's called Pecan. I started out my career. I ran the the whole survey process for IBM, and I ran it for Motorola, and I saw Pecan, and I just couldn't believe how much time I could have saved in my life if it had existed back when I was doing that at the beginning of my career. Right. But Pecan has a very good system. And what I particularly like about it, and I don't know if there might be other ones out there beyond Pecan that does this. They were acquired by Workday a year or two ago. So they now are within Workday. But the nicest part is not only do they help you narrow down what you need to focus on, and not by using the mistake that a lot of people make with survey results is they say, what's the lowest? We need to address that. I guarantee you your lowest ratings will be compensation. Always. I guarantee it. Okay. Without exception. Otherwise, your employees are idiot, or you're idiots, or possibly your company's overpaying. But comp will always be lowest. What you want to do is look at is a more sophisticated analysis of what it is that predicts their wanting to be in the company. And that's what Pecan does. And then it tells you these are the top things that you need to focus on for retention. And then once it tells you those top things, it allows you to double click, and it gives you resources to address whatever is coming up. So whatever the issues might be. So it's very, very well thought out. So that's surveys. Right. Some other things in terms of retention, I like to, there's an assessment that I use that is not shareable, and it's not available publicly. But it gives you a score of how likely it is that somebody's going to leave, kind of green, yellow, red. Okay. And I'll talk about what's in that, what kinds of areas are covered in that assessment. This one has a scoring system. And one of the things that, I was amazed at how well it predicted. And the one that really stood out to me was one time I did the assessment for somebody, and they were the biggest red I had ever had. And they resigned the next day. So it just,
the next day.
The next day.
So you were right. Your scoring was correct.
Scoring was very smart.
Wow.
But the areas that are assessed are how mobile is this person? Could they move to some other location? So that obviously opens up the opportunities for them. Okay. How marketable are they?
So mobility in terms of whether they're tied to the community and or the organization. Okay.
Yep. Marketability, how marketable are their skills? Nurses have incredibly marketable skills, as we all know. Their job satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and their career satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So I might like my job, but it's not taking me where I want to go in my career.
Okay, right.
Workplace relationships. And then the biggest predictor, which I didn't know until I got this, was personal or professional shocks. So a personal shock would be losing somebody close to you, a parent, a spouse, a child, something like that. Causes people to evaluate their lives.
Right.
And a professional shock means something like I got passed over for promotion that I thought I was going to get. That kind of thing. That brings you, if they've had that gets your red score. That almost always puts you into the red as being at risk. So that's an assessment. So what I've liked doing in my HR roles has been implementing a pattern, a timing for like on a quarterly basis or every half that managers assess their folks and figure out who may be at risk of leaving.
Okay.
And then help them with using tools that can be applied for the people who are at risk. So stay interview is one of those. And again, we have a link for you. No, I did not create it. Monica asked me if I created the assessment, and I did not create it. I've used it, but I probably could create one. So. Right.
And you mentioned that the tool you're specifically referring to is not something you could share publicly, but I'm just going to post in the chat the areas that you talked about assessing so that people can think about. It's mobility, marketability, job and career satisfaction and dissatisfaction, workplace relationships, and then personal or professional shocks. And I'm sure if people look online, they can probably find other tools that might help with that as well. But that sounds really interesting, especially with the high success rate that you found.
Oh my God, it was scary. It was scary. That sometimes you're not surprised with what you find, but every so often you go, "Oh my God, I didn't think about that. That this person has this, and this all going on." And
that's true.
And then suddenly, they're thinking about leaving.
Right.
Anyway, so the stay interviews, again, we have a link for you on how to conduct those, and you can Google those.
We can share that link. And also we did a webinar maybe about a year ago on stay interviews as well, so people can look back in our archives on our YouTube channel. Again, I can send you the link to find the stay interview webinar specifically that we did, which was got a great response as well. So good. Okay, thanks for that suggestion as well.
Yeah, and then I'll make the point, it may be obvious, it might not be, but the frontline leaders, of course, are the most critical for retention. People tend to leave their manager, not their company.
Right.
And so it's supporting those frontline leaders that's going to do the most for your retention. And I think with nurses, that's a key because, so much of their job is so hard. And if they have a good manager who is the right level of tough but caring, they're more likely to stay.
Sure. And so often it's about what training experience the manager has for that leadership role. I mean, maybe they were great at being a nurse or whatever the specific task was, but do they have the skills to be in a leadership role, or do they need support to be a leader and ongoing training and so on? And so I think that overall culture from the organization can really affect that as well and support people to grow in their careers and therefore support others as well on their team.
Right. And then the other thing that can matter a lot for retention is development opportunities. And that was that difference between the job and the career. So. Right.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that roadmap that we talked about moving forward. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, I know the other thing that you and I talked about, Donna, is, you've suggested a lot of really valuable ideas things to think about, some specific tools that people can look into using in their work. Some of these things take dollars or time investment, right, within the organization. That can be a challenge, of course, especially these days where most organizations are facing budget crunches on some level. What do you suggest about getting buy-in from management to make any changes, even if it's to implement a small tool that's going to take up some time or dollars?
So really the key to convincing management is creating the business case for what the problem's costing. And when I say cost, it's the things that you mentioned, Patrick. It's money, it's stress, it's retention, it's costing us talent. So what's it costing? And then what's it going to take to fix it? And, is there a payback for that? And if you can show them the payback, first of all, they have to agree with you that is a problem that they want to fix. And then secondly, they have to agree that what you're proposing is going to be worthwhile and will fix it. So those are the keys. I make it sound simple. It's anything but sure. But just thinking about it that way, I think really helps to create your case.
That is helpful. Yeah. And it's a bit of a skill, isn't it, to be able to build a case like that. And often you might have a team member who's done it before who has input. I know, Donna, you can help with this, so people could reach out to you if they're interested in some support on this. You also mentioned again that you would love to do a job analysis or a problem solving analysis in healthcare. So I'd encourage people to reach out to Donna if you want some advice from Donna or input from Donna on doing that as well. Any other comments, questions, Donna, that you'd like to share? We're doing a good job of filling the hour. This is great. Lots of information. And I will remind people again, let us know if you do want any of those links. We'll get those to you. You can reach out to either Donna or myself. And actually, I'm going to share our contact information on the screen again. There it is. So feel free to reach out to Donna or myself by email or LinkedIn. We can get you those links. And of course, as I said, Donna you can consult with Donna if you have some questions that she might be able to help with more broadly as well. Any other thoughts, Donna, about this important and complicated topic of maintaining quality in hires?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. So hopefully it wasn't overwhelming, but it is a big challenge and it's ever evolving.
It is for sure. Well, thanks so much, Donna. This has been really interesting. As I said at the beginning, you've got a lot of really interesting and diverse experience that you bring to this. And you've got some great examples, and this has been really helpful, I think. Lots of good tips for people to think about and dig into. And again, those tools that we can share with people as well. So thanks so much for your time. And I will mention to people that, again, feel free to reach out to me. The link is on the screen again now to find out more about AptlyChat Healthcare, about our services for sourcing nurses and also allied health and physician recruitment that we've moved into. And you can also find all of our previous webinars, the recordings and information, the notifications about our future webinars, and all the groups that Eleanor mentioned as well at the beginning. So I look forward to hearing from you for those who are interested in that. And other than that, I will close for today. Again, thank you, Donna, and thanks to everyone for joining. And I will go into my Zoom channel if anyone does have questions that they wanted to share with me and talk about AptlyChat Healthcare. I'll be in my Zoom room shortly, and I will get the link and put it in the chat here as well. And you can join me there. Donna, thanks so much. And we hope that you have success in your consulting career. And please do reach out to Donna if people have interest in her services as well. So my Zoom link is in the chat, and I'll be there shortly. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.